Today's episode of Socially Democratic is presented to you by Dunn Street. Dunn Street is a campaign agency that specialises in community organising. We only work with people that want to build power to make the world a better place, including community-based organisations, trade unions, progressive businesses and social democratic parties across the globe. We develop community engagement strategies to win campaigns both big and small. We train engagement staff and volunteers in the Marshall Gantz framework of leadership, organising and action, and we help folks craft their story through the practice of public narrative that connects people through shared values and moves them to act together. And if you want to act together with your community, then hit us up at dunnstreet.com.au. Today's episode is also brought to you by Maurice Blackburn Lawyers. The Maurice Blackburn Corporate Conduct and Class Actions Symposium is back, and it's being held on the 2nd of May this year, with tickets selling fast for this year's Legal Industry Showcase. This year's program includes another all-star lineup headlined by a keynote speech from the High Court, the Honourable Justice Robert Beach-Jones. And to secure your tickets to hear from the nation's industry experts in class actions, corporate conduct, data privacy and advocates in both consumer and shareholder matters, simply visit mauriceblackburn.com.au/class-actions/symposium. We will put the link in the bio of today's episode as well, so you can just click on that and enter the discount code VIP for a 50% discount, which is available to listeners of this wonderful podcast. Or just reach out to Maurice Blackburn Events team directly by emailing mblevents@mauriceblackburn.com.au and mention this podcast, and you'll get that 50% discount for tickets to the symposium. So remember, that's on the 2nd of May. Check it out. Hello and welcome to another episode of Socially Democratic, your weekly centre-left politics and organising podcast that's out every Friday, that dives into the progressive campaigns of the day and the people leading them from home and abroad. And on today's episode, we're talking to a good friend of mine, the member for Macnamara in the Federal Parliament, Josh Burns. I haven't spoken to Josh in quite some time. It happens to just coincidentally coincide with the start of the NBA Finals post-season. So we're not going to be talking about that at the start of the show. As you know, we'll always leave a bit of NBA chat to the end. But what we will be talking about at the start is some stuff around housing, how the federal Labor government is doing what their priorities are for 2024, cost of living, the nuclear option that's been run by the Tories, and a whole bunch of other things in between. So looking forward to talking to Josh today on our show. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like the show, give us 5 stars and leave us a review. And for everything else, follow Dunn Street on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And just to let you know that we're going to be launching our Socially Democratic Patreon page soon, but more details to come on that. We can get show updates, new merchandise, and just financially support the podcast. And I'm really glad I didn't call it Patron. That's my goal for this year, is not to refer to Patreon as the tequila. Okay, let's get to today's episode. We are taping this one on a glorious Monday morning on the lands of the Wurundjeri people. Old Melbourne's just jagged out a 23-degree mid-April. Did not see that one coming, but I'll take it as we get closer and closer to winter is coming. Joining me on this glorious day is a glorious member for Macnamara and 6-time MVP for Mount Scopus basketball team, Josh Burns MP. Welcome back to Socially Democratic.
Do you know what's really sad, Stephen, is that now I'm at the stage in my life where all of the greatest athletic performances of my life, which were not many, are all behind me. There will be no day ahead of me where I will be able to repeat some of the athletic feats of my past, including the year 10 basketball domination of high school. It's all downhill from here. I get really sore after games. It's just not the same.
Can you be honest with me and tell me that was there a period in your youth where you thought, or you at least dreamed of playing professional elite level basketball? And when was the moment you realized that dream had extinguished? Like, there's a certain age bracket where you don't realize it and you go, shit, I'm 29 now. I'll never be able to make it. Did it happen?
hang on, that hasn't happened yet. Why are you crushing my dreams on this
How old are
podcast?
you?
Well, don't ask questions like that. The dream is alive, and I might still make it. I feel like like those movies where you get someone from the crowd and they come on and they do something miraculous to win the game.
Mm-hmm.
That might be possible. Like I don't think I'm going to start for the Melbourne United Basketball Club. But what might happen is I might be like, and tonight a fan is going to play for United, and then I become that fan, and then I hit this like awesome shot, and then I just walk off, and I'm like,
I'm done.
okay, now I'm done. It kind of is like it's kind of like Bill Murray in Space Jam. Now we're getting to a niche reference here.
Mm.
Bill Murray goes to Space Jam. He does one play, and then he walks off, and he's like, Michael, I'm announcing my retirement from professional basketball. And I feel like that's still ahead of me. That could still happen.
Space Jam, an underrated sports movie, if there ever was one.
I haven't seen number 2 with LeBron, but number 1 was fantastic.
We will, as folks know, that when Josh and I do the podcast, we always talk about basketball at the end. And we leave it at the end because we know that no one is coming on this show to listen to you and I talk about NBA, except for probably, I know at least 3 people that have said to me, oh, no, Stephen, I stick with you. I stick with you right through to the end. And I appreciate that. That's great. But the rest of you, obviously, who come for this for political chat, we understand that. And that's why we leave it to the end. So you can cut listening and go do other things as opposed to listen to you. But just to let those 3 people know, we will be talking basketball at the end. But let's get into some of the more substantive things. Now, political. I wanted to sort of, actually, we'll try to get you and Annika on to do our end of year wrap. Time didn't allow us. Then we actually started to record an episode, and then we had massive technical difficulties. So we never really got to do that annual episode. It's just you and I today. But I want to ask a question that we did have in our last episode, which was, what are the goals for 2024? We're kind of like a quarter of the way through for Labor. What are the goals for Labor in this calendar year? What's been met to start with, and then I want to get a follow-up about where you need to continue to focus as we move through the calendar year.
Yeah, well, it's probably the most important question politically that we all have to address as the Federal Parliamentary Labor Party, and I think it's a completely obvious answer that Australians are feeling financial pressure like they haven't for a long, long time, and yeah, whenever I have conversations with people, when we ask people what's important to you, especially young people, it just comes back to the financial pressures that they are facing on a daily basis, and it's real, and those pressures are mounting, and we recognise it. And whether it's your mortgage, whether it's your rent, whether it's your groceries, you're going to the petrol bowser, whatever it is, people are feeling the pinch. So that's our big focus. We obviously announced the redesign of the Stage 3 tax cuts, which, was not an easy thing to do. That there was a political cost and question that had to be considered because it was different to the Morrison government's package. But it was like, we're Labor people, and when you also give us and give people a chance to argue for what's right and what's decent, that's, I think, in our nature, and that's something that we all rallied behind, and we all supported the Prime Minister and the Treasurer's decision to do that. And so it'll mean that people on middle and lower incomes are going to get a more of a bigger tax return in the middle of the year, and I think that's going to be really important. There are other measures, and this year there are going to be other things that we are going to do that will assist with cost of living. And I think the Prime Minister and the Treasurer have hinted at the things that we're looking at as well, and looking at what we can do, especially for young people. I think that there are mounting pressures, whether it be HECS, debts that traditionally have been very low interest loans. Because of inflation, they have become higher interest loans, and the mounting pressures of HECS debts, as well as the day-to-day expenses like what supermarkets are charging for ordinary products. These are things that we're looking to take the pressure off people. So there'll obviously be more to say in the budget, and I would get into a lot of trouble if I superseded Jim Chalmers' speech. But I think that hopefully gives you a sense of what we're going to be focused on this year and how we're going to try and do our best to help the people that we're privileged to represent.
Because, I mean, it is a challenge, isn't it, really, when you think about the way that the economy is structured for a government to create policies directly to try and impact the burden that voters and consumers are feeling when it comes to cost of living. And it's happening right across the globe right now. Every if you look at every major OECD country, they're all struggling with the cost of living pressures. An interesting thing that's happening in the United States is that most of the economic indicators are showing that the US economy has bounced back from the high inflation and high cost of living. But when voters are surveyed, they're saying that we don't feel that just yet. And I'm just wondering also, like, I know that we've started to see better figures here in the Australian economy when it comes to cost of living pressures, but I'm just wondering, is that being translated to Main Street for folks? And what more can we do in respect to that? And how long does this take? Like, how long does it take for the, when, like, I mean, the tax cuts don't come in until July. Measures in the budget, which will come in, this takes time for it to have an impact. And I'm wondering about how can we quickly sort of start to sort of solve these problems for Australian families.
Well, I think two things can be true at the same time, and I think that it is true to say that some of the key economic indicators are positive or trending in the right direction. And I also think it's true to say that people are feeling the financial pressures of day-to-day expenditure. I mean, when you look at unemployment, it's still under 4. You look at inflation, it's coming down, trending away from the high mark of sort of 6 to 8, 6 to 7, and even heading towards 8. And it's now, it's now about half that. So the economy is, people are working, inflation is coming down, and the budget position will obviously be announced by the Treasurer, but commodity prices, and due to the high amount of people working in the economy, revenue is okay, and government is, or the economy is being managed in a really professional and sophisticated way by the Treasurer. So I think at a macro level, there is really strong and sensible economic management. But when you have an ordinary conversation with an ordinary person, is it hard to pay for all your bills? Well, yes, it is. And when you have, we still have high interest rates, which has put a lot more pressure on families. And until we have that reduced, that is going to be a big expenditure on households. For some people, it's hundreds, if not thousands, of dollars extra per month, depending on the size of your mortgage. Your rental prices have gone up, and obviously, we are putting a lot of effort into trying to hold the supermarkets to a much higher standard, because we know that the prices and the margins are too high at the moment. So I think it's true to say that the economy and the budget is being managed professionally, and I think Jim Chalmers is doing a really like an excellent job, and he's very, very good at this. But it's also true to say that Australians are struggling, so we need to help them get through the weekly and the month to month, and it will take a bit of time. But I think we are trending in the right direction. We're certainly listening to people, and we're putting more things on the table, and we'll continue to do that.
You mentioned supermarkets there, and I noticed that you've had a couple of things to say about this particular topic in the last couple of weeks. What's your take on the behaviour of the major supermarket retailers in this period of financial stress that families are facing?
Well, the thing we hear from people most is that they're making decisions based on what sort of products they can buy. Can they buy nutritious food for their family? And that's like that's what this is all about. It's like I want companies to be successful. I mean, I want our economy to be strong and healthy. No, like we're not extremists here. We just want people to be able to afford important things that they need for their families. So when it comes to supermarkets, there have been instances where the prices have gone up, and that's not being translated either to farmers and wholesalers, that it is a margin increase on the retail component, and that's being felt by families. So what the government has done is, we understand that these supply chains and these processes are complicated, so we've given the ACCC the job of looking into it, um, and they will come up with recommendations, or they did come up with recommendations around how best to tackle it, including some interim, as part of their interim report, and that looked at things like bigger penalties, a more robust code of conduct, making sure that supermarkets are actually held to account for their actions, and to ensure that there is proper disincentives for bad behaviour. I finish where I started, where we are not seeking to take away, healthy, fresh supply chains, Australian businesses, farmers. Like, we need supermarkets. Of course we do. Supermarket workers help get our country through the pandemic. The SDA workers, they were the ones who did an extraordinary job turning up to work, stacking shelves when there was immense pressure. This is not an ideological thing. This is about making sure that, if a parent goes to the supermarket, can they afford to buy their kids fruit, veggies, healthy food, making good choices for their kids, and that's what we want.
As you talk about that, and we're right to bring in the heavy lifting that retail workers did during COVID, and I then sort of think about a lot of the heavy lifting a lot of people did in various different industries during COVID, and the relationship between government and business, and how government used taxpayers' money to support business during that difficult time. And another company I think about is Qantas. Here we have now, we've come through that period of COVID, and consumers are still feeling the pinch, yet we have these big companies who, I don't know, it feels like they're tone deaf, like they've forgotten how we all pulled together collectively to overcome these challenges as a society, not just for Australia, but globally. And now they're like, oh, business as usual, and I'm just going to, fatten my profit margin. And I reckon as just regular Australians, we look at those companies and go, oh, hang on a minute. Like, our tax dollars went to help you lot to get through that because we thought it was a collective effort. But now you're sort of like business as usual. Is it? I mean, this is a more of a broader kind of conversation, though, Josh, isn't it? Like, I mean, why are we in this situation where we have these companies that just seem to be a little bit kind of unaware of, the frailties of our society in moments, but then in other times they're like, well, let's get stuck back into it. Let's make some serious money here and not worry about consumers.
Well, I mean, obviously, you've got different corporate players that, like, some are better than others. I would also make the point that, we want there to be a healthy economy. We want there to be jobs. I think the approach of Peter Dutton of trying to, boycott one business or another is sort of juvenile and not particularly sophisticated. In saying that, though, I think the things that we've done since coming to government has been try to give people, especially workers, more power and more ability to negotiate and more ability to have secure work, better pay, increased wages. None of that gets given for free. And none of that, no business is saying, well, let's make sure that wage theft is a crime. Let's make sure that we give small enterprises the ability to bargain collectively. No, that's not coming from business. That's coming from the Labor Party. And our tech companies weren't saying we need to, help create standards so that gig economy workers were, not unsafe and paid at least, for goodness sake, the minimum wage. Like, that wasn't being offered up by business. That was the initiative of the union movement and the Labor government, trying to ensure that workers are represented by federal government who want them to have better standards and better pay at work. And I think that's been our approach. Now, my philosophy on this is one like many Labor people, where actually it's in the workers' interest and the business's interest for the business to be successful. And certainly it's in the Labor government's interest. We want our economy to grow. We want businesses to be successful. We want the Australian economy to be healthy. We want people to be able to afford the things that they need to afford. But at the same time, we also want that power balance between corporations and organisations and the people who work within them, who make them profitable, to be one where it is more even, and it is a constant pull and push between different governments of trying to water down workers' rights and workers' powers, and Labor governments trying to do the opposite, of trying to increase the ability of workers to have more of a say, better pay, and to earn a bit more. And that's something that we have a lot more work to do on, but I'm proud of the work we've done already.
You touched on before about housing as well, and obviously this is, I mean, I think I'm sure if you polled most voters today, what are the two most important issues to them? Cost of living would be one, and housing would be a close second on it, I would assume. And this debate's been going for quite some time, and even this podcast, we've dabbled into that sort of policy conversation with bringing some experts on to talk about it. I just kind of want to get an update from you about where we are. Where is the debate right now? I saw clips on Twitter a couple of weeks ago. The show Q&A had a whole bunch of folks on specifically to talk about housing. I don't actually watch Q&A. I haven't watched it since 1883 or whatever. I'm amazed it's still going. But on there, they had, I think, Rose Jackson, Labor MP for New South Wales. I think Andrew Lee, your colleague, might have been on there. Former ALP member, Big Fish, Small Pond, Max Chandler, Mathers III was on there. So there's a whole bunch of different people on there, experts and not so much experts. And the grabs that the ABC were punching up were all these little pithy grabs, particularly from Max Chandler Mather, and Twitter was lathering themselves up over these kind of things. And I was sort of thinking to myself, hang on, this is a really complex issue, and I don't think it can actually be summarized in a couple of pithy grabs. And I want to get a sense from you about where are we in trying to solve this problem? Like, from a government perspective, what's Labor started to embark on to try and solve this problem of housing, and what more can be done?
Well, Stephen, you're 100% right that the housing sector won't be solved by a pithy grab from our friend from the north. You'll forgive me for not watching that episode nor the Twitter reminiscing afterwards, but literally do anything else other than that for my own sanity.
I think I watched. To be fair, I think I watched it because I really do rate Rose Jackson, and I thought, oh, she's going to be good against Chandler Mathers III, but I don't think she could get a word in.
Rose is. I've had a few conversations with Rose about housing, and I really respect her and admire her. I also obviously respect Andrew. I think he's we're fortunate to have someone like him in the federal parliament. He's a real intellect. He works really hard, and he's a very nice person, and I like him a lot. But Anyway, let's put the episode aside and let's talk about the housing sector. Let's start with some good things. The good things is that the first round of the Housing Australia Future Fund applications have been closed. This is a program that was in the media a little bit about. It's direct funding for social housing projects by the federal government, something that the Morrison government just didn't do. They had this philosophy that it had to be the state, so they just wiped their hands of it. And what it shows is that the financial model that was set up by, originally conceived by Jason Clare, and that Julie Collins has helped set up and got through the Parliament, is a really good one, and that community housing providers and social housing providers want to use it because it means that it will facilitate the building and construction of thousands of homes. So that's a really good thing. The thing I'm sort of nervous about in the housing sector is taking a step back. So in the housing sector, you have a component of it that is required for social housing, and us together with the states and territories are building a lot of homes. There's a healthy dialogue about how many, but we are there is a lot, billions of dollars are being invested in it right now. But then you've got a much bigger component of the housing sector, which which is essential because it affects all of the other components of the housing sector. The housing sector is a spectrum, depending on how many people own their own home, depends on how many people rent their own home, depends on how many people who can afford to rent and then are pushed into social housing, and the amount of people who are, the amount of dwellings we've got and how many people are homeless. The overall number of homes that we are required to build across the country, for a few reasons, many of whom are completely outside the federal government's control, is going down dramatically. Things like the cost of supplies, supply chain, the time it takes to get planning approvals through council and potentially state government, depending on the density. Community objection. You've got people like Max who oppose a lot of housing development in inner city areas. All of this is sort of this perfect storm of the number of dwellings in the private sector is actually not keeping up with the amount that we need in order to bring down housing prices. And it's why you hear the Prime Minister say over and over again, well, actually the key to housing is supply. And I'm very nervous about it, and Jim Chalmers is very aware of this issue. It's why he's signed on with the states and territories to bring in the Housing Accord, which essentially is a goal to try and facilitate the construction of 1.25 million homes over the next 5 years. That is a goal that will hopefully reflect the demand that we need in order to keep up with the number of homes that we actually need to build. So to give you a scale of all of that, we need in Victoria to be building, I think it's around 80 or 90,000 homes a year, and when we're not quite at that. And Jacinta Allen is fast tracking homes because she's aware of the need. But if we build a fraction of that, think about what that does to the rental market. You've got the same amount of renters or even a growing population in a city like Melbourne, and you don't have enough homes being built to keep up with that demand. Well, the number of homes, is comparatively smaller, and the demand is comparatively bigger. It means more people bidding for fewer homes. It means prices go up. So the rental market, I'm nervous about in Melbourne and in Sydney and in Brisbane and Adelaide, and I'm nervous about the number of homes that are being built, because that, no matter how many social housing homes we build, which we are doing, we're back in the game on social housing. The community sector's happy. In fact, they're saying to us, "Can you scale it up a bit? Because we could do more and more, and the capacity is there." But we will never keep up with the demand unless we also ensure that the private sector is building enough homes, because the scale of all of that is far bigger. So I think that the honest picture the way I see it in the housing sector is, it is like so refreshing to know that the federal government and our Labor government is building homes, because Morrison, Turnbull, Abbott didn't do it. We also need to be working with the states and territories and local councils, who have a lot of the levers on some of the other things that are slowing down the construction and the investment in new homes. And we need to collectively be working to make sure that the number of homes that are being built matches demand. Less NIMBYism, more streamlined approvals, but also more effort to try and ensure that there are enough homes for people. And that's, I think, a fundamental responsibility of Labor governments.
That NIMBYism thing's an important point you mentioned there. I was talking to an architect friend the other day who he and his family we were talking about housing actually over a coffee, and he and his family, they're off to Japan for a couple of weeks, and to Tokyo, and we'll talk about medium density housing and how Australia has always had a real pushback against that this urban sprawl of our capital cities just gets, further and further and further out from the center of town. And I said, you want to see medium and high density housing? Go to Tokyo. It's the most populated city on the planet, and they make it work. But it works because there is medium density housing. Is this a wall that we just can't seem to get around as Australians? Is this idea of actually, if we're going to build more homes, whether it be homes to rent, homes to live, to own, or public housing, that it has to be more medium density housing, and right across the current footprint of Melbourne or Sydney or Brisbane or Adelaide or Perth or wherever. You live in the seat of Macnamara. There's a lot of flats in Macnamara. I know that. I've door knocked that electorate, and you too, you have as well a number of times, because that's why you're still the member of Macnamara. But Elwood, that area of Elwood has got heaps of flats. It's a flat, neighborhood, right?
72% of people in Elwood live in an apartment.
Yeah. I love Elwood. It's a great part of the city, actually. But, if you go out to, say, Brighton, it's just all, the suburban backyard, right? Like these areas could do with a couple of more flats. Look, I just want to get a sense of, I don't want picking Tory held seats, but you know what I mean? Like, kind of like, we're all going to take our fair share of this burden and say, where we can build up, we need to build up. I say that as someone who lives in a flat.
Well, I think that the politics of this is really interesting, because clearly the Liberal Party, have had this whole like, don't build in my backyard, but so have the Greens.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
even in Port Melbourne, we've got this public housing estate, which we it wasn't even a high rise. It was these were just like old buildings where we used to get weekly complaints from residents being like, the windows won't shut, there's drafts, I'm freezing in here, this is broken, it's not taking too long to fix. Like every week there was this just avalanche of issues. And the state government actually made the decision to say, look, we're going to put this. It was a really spread out bit of land, and the housing density wasn't so good. So what we're going to do is we're going to do actually what's the best practice, which is incorporate social housing with ordinary homes. Like these people are not outcasts; they're ordinary members of society, and they deserve to live among ordinary community members. So we're gonna put that in and around it. We're going to sell off some of the other apartments to help pay for it and subsidise it, so we can help provide a larger number of social housing dwellings. In the meantime, people are going to get access to a private rental property in and around the area within 5 kilometres, and are going to be supported and given the option to come back to a brand new apartment. Like, it's complicated, but you're going to get more social housing homes. It's going to be better. They're not going to be drafty. They're going to be beautiful homes, and people are going to have a chance to come back. And if you don't want to, you can stay where you're living at the moment. Anyway, like the Greens completely lost their brain over it. They were running petitions on it, and they were, like somehow, in the real world, if you're actually trying to build more homes and reduce the amount of expenditure that's required for taxpayers in a responsible way while providing new homes and social housing homes, you can't do that. Like, we're not in a utopia. You have to make hard choices, but you have to do your best to support people along that way. And the Greens completely opposed it, and they were, doing petitions and just completely losing their brain over it. And I think it just is a reflection of we are in the Labor Party. We are seeking to govern. If we are going to build homes, we need to build them on land. We need builders to build them. We need, plans to be approved. We need a policy around who gets those homes. We need to invest in those homes. We need real budget decisions. We don't need pithy grabs on the ABC. We need to govern through this. And we need to make hard decisions and try and do our best to explain our reasons to the community and do our best to get community support. The Greens don't have to do any of that, and neither the Liberal Party at the moment. They just can complain and say that it's all Labor's fault. Well, okay, but in the meantime, let's actually try and do something for the housing sector.
There's one thing that both the Liberal Party and the Greens have. Actually, there's a lot of things they have in common, but one of them is that they're very much problems focused and not solutions oriented political parties. I want to talk about nuclear, because that's something that's started to come into the media over the last
It's pronounced nuclear.
The last couple of months, perhaps, I would say. And that has been, this is sort of this is the coalition or the Liberal Party in particular's answer to this shift in public attitudes, I think, more broadly towards renewable energy. I think most Australians would probably say that we need to move in this direction. This is a smart thing to do. And so the Liberal Party have gone, not on my watch, and they we've got to come up with something else. And they're going, let's do nuclear. But the problem is that there's some issues within their own coalition about that. Tell us about some of these friction lines that are happening within the coalition on this issue of nuclear power.
Well, first of all, let me say that it's completely bonkers what the Liberal Party is doing. Like that, they are lost in a world of insanity right now, and they know it. And there are people inside the Liberal Party that know it, and the walls of Jericho are crumbling around them. But anyway, let's unpack it a bit and make some serious policy points. First of all, Australia has a nuclear reactor. We already do. It's in Lucas Heights in Sydney, and it's a small open water reactor where we make medicinal compounds out of uranium and out of a nuclear fission reaction, where this is a very complicated piece of technology that helps create compounds that detect and treat cancers. It is also used for science and research. We are not in the world of ignoring technology. This is not a technology debate. This is actually an economics debate. Nuclear power is a low emissions technology, and there's no argument against that. But that's not what Peter Dutton is doing here. He is not arguing for a march towards climate action. And I think anyone who has listened to Peter Dutton over the last 15 years would know that this is no champion of climate action here, right? This is Peter Dutton we're talking about. What he is talking about, and he even says it in question time, is he says that Labor has a renewables only approach, which, we're trying to get more renewable energy into the grid, because when you build new energy, and it's not me, Josh Burns, citizen of St Kilda, saying this. This is the CSIRO, who do a report on this every year, who owe us nothing, say that the cheapest form of energy, new energy, is renewable energy firmed up with some sort of dispatchable energy. And believe it or not, we actually do want low emissions electricity in our grid. It's one of the biggest industrial efforts our country's ever undergone, what Crispo and Anthony Albanese are trying to do right now. It is a huge amount of work. We're talking about thousands of jobs. We're talking about huge bits of machinery. We're talking about the way in which we're powering a country for almost 30 million people. Like this is a huge task. So yes, we are trying to as coal-fired power stations are coming out of the grid, we are trying to replace them with cleaner and cheaper forms of energy, and that is predominantly renewables. So yes, we are doing that. What Peter Dutton is doing is saying, well, he doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to replace our coal with renewables. So he's trying to have this big distraction, and he's using nuclear energy as that big distraction. But it's got holes in it. So let's go through some of those holes. First of all, it is very, very expensive, right? It is very, very expensive. The large-scale nuclear reactors are in the tens of billions of dollars. We're talking about the amount of money that we are going to be spending to rewire the entire country, probably wouldn't be enough to put a brand new nuclear reactor in one place, to replace one coal-fired power station. And the economics of the private sector are not where it's not that there is huge amounts of capital, lining up to build this. This would have to be subsidized by government. It just makes no financial sense. And when you look at the cost of electricity, what that would mean for households is that your bills would be going up by 5, 6, 7 times. We're talking about hundreds, thousands of dollars of increase on your family electricity bill because Peter Dutton wants to build an exorbitant nuclear reactor as part of his energy mix. And we wouldn't need just one, we would need multiple because of the amount of electricity that each reactor can build. So that's if you go down the large-scale nuclear reactor. Then for a while there, they were saying that would only consider small modular reactors.
I love this one.
Well, small modular reactors are like saying, yeah, we're going to power them with unicorns and fairy lamps. Like, well, you might, but they don't exist here at the moment. There is a prototype being built by the Chinese government. I don't think we're buying that one. There's a prototype being built by the Russian government. I really don't think we're buying that one. And then there's one. Then there's one that was being built by a company in Utah called NewScale, which is an American company that was originally meant to deliver a small modular reactor. So a reactor that can be built in a factory and then shipped out and put in a different location. And it was meant to be delivered by 2026 in 2 years' time. That was original pricing was $5 billion. Well, then that got pushed out to like 2027, 2028. The price went from 5 billion to 8 billion, then to 10 billion, and then it was pushed out to 2030, 2031. And then all of a sudden, the 10 billion price tag wasn't going to actually cover it, and all of the finances just went, this thing is so expensive. And it's just like, when you start looking at, well, the whole point of building a modular product is that you can build it at scale, reduce the amount of cost per build, and therefore you can roll it out, and the cost comes down. But when the cost just keeps ballooning because it costs a lot to ensure that nuclear reactors are safe, it's just unviable. So the liberals know most of this, I think. The Nationals know most of this, I think. There are some people in it who know it better than others, and who are also very aware that the politics and the community buy-in for a nuclear reactor is just very patchy around the country. And that's why you're seeing David Littleproud and Bridget Archer and a whole range of other people being like, I just don't think we've thought this thing through, and we need to do the work. And the more you do the work, the more the facts will come out that this thing is about as smart as a, I don't know, it's smart as a, I'm trying to think of something humorous. As putting, it's about as smart as putting, all of the old veterans on one NBA team and expecting them to win a championship. It's just not going to happen, right? Like, the super teams of old don't just happen. It's just wild. And Peter Dutton is ultimately trying to prevent the transition towards renewable energy. They have never supported climate action. They've never supported the Labor Party's efforts to transition our grid. And they've come up with a dumb idea to try and do something instead.
It feels like their policies are all. If someone's watched Back to the Future Part 2 when they went to 2015, and they're sort of looking at Hill Valley in 2015 and going, well, that's what we should do. That will be all our policies. We'll have local nuclear reactors, hover-driven cars, and pizzas that get bigger when you put them in a microwave. Anyway, I want to talk about the Middle East. And this conflict that's been going on now for, it's almost, was it 7, maybe moving into this 8th month, has taken on, it's getting more regional and bigger, because in the recent days we've seen Iran and in Israel exchange rocket fire on numerous occasions. And it was, pretty alarming to see, rockets lighting up the skies over Jerusalem, something that I don't think anyone would think would happen. And largely, really, since this war began, Iran have been this sort of shadow player, because they've been funding their proxies, Hezbollah to the north of Israel, and Hamas in Gaza, and the Houthi rebels in Yemen, blocking a lot of the cargo ships moving through the Red Sea. But yet they've not really been drawn into this conflict, but now they have. And I want to get your reflections on this. What does this mean for the conflict? Because if you want to try and stop a conflict, you need to contain it and get everyone to sort of take a step back and de-escalate. But it doesn't seem to be going that way. And with Iran sort of stepping in and firing rockets on Israel, I'm just wondering, where do we go from here?
It's a great question, Stephen. Let me say a couple of things. First of all, I really hope that the conflict ends soon, or today, or there are a lot of innocent people who have lost their lives, and I just want people to be able to live in safety and security. And I think everyone shares that perspective. We want Palestinians, Israelis, ordinary Iranian citizens to be able to live their life, and to be able to have dignity and security and peace, just as we enjoy it. it goes without saying, but I think it's important to say it as well. But if you were to understand what is happening in the Middle East, I think you touched on it really nicely in that opening, is that actually the sands of the Middle East are shifting dramatically. In the last 5 years, Israel has normalized relationship with the United Arab Emirates, with Bahrain. They've taken steps with Sudan. These are countries where it would have been inconceivable for Israel to have diplomatic relationships. And now there are embassies. There's like $4 billion of private tech investment from Israel into the UAE. There's synagogues being built in Abu Dhabi and Dubai. I mean, there is a flurry of exchange between two countries that, frankly, over Israel's history have never spoken to each other. The other big player is that Saudi Arabia is also making public noises about wanting to normalize relationships with Israel. Now, this is unimaginable that the Saudi family would be looking to normalize relationships with Israel. And you have to ask yourself, what is the motivating factor behind it? I think there are two things. One is obviously that Israel is a modern economy and that these people are business people and they are looking to establish prosperous, healthy societies and engage with other prosperous societies in the region. That's obviously an incentive. But the other one is Iran. As Iran moves to enrich uranium and become a nuclear power in the region, it is scaring the crap out of these countries. And when Iran sent drones over and missiles over to Israel, it wasn't just the Israeli Defense Forces who were intercepting them. It was the Jordanians, it was the Egyptians, it was the Saudis. It was the Gulf states who were leaping to the defense of the Israeli citizens because they are more nervous about a belligerent Iran than they are about a prosperous Israel. And that is a huge shift in the dynamics of the Middle East. And I think it also is a reflection on where the United States is trying to lead the Middle East to, is away from Iran, who funds Hamas to the tune of almost $100 million a year, and other militant factions inside Gaza, including PIJ. They fund Hezbollah to the tune of $600 million a year, which is their biggest proxy, and they've used them in also supporting the Assad regime in Syria and squashing Sunni uprising in Syria. They fund and have armed the Houthis, who have not only attacked Israeli shipping supplies, but American and Australian as well. And it's part of the reason why Australia has joined the United States and the United Kingdom in targeting the Houthis. Iran has tried to act as a counter to the Gulf and Saudi states working and realigning the Middle East so that there is an alliance of people who want stability, prosperity, and cooperation. And Iran does not want that. Now, inside all of that big macro picture, Saudis are saying, and the UAE is saying, that they want more stability and security for the Palestinian people, and I completely understand that as well. Now, they cannot be forgotten as part of this, and Australia will support efforts to ensure that there is more stability and security for the Palestinian people. And the foreign minister touched on that in some of her recent speeches, as well as ensuring that Israelis can live in safe and secure borders and not be threatened with the sort of terrorism that they saw on October 7. But the macro picture in the Middle East is one where you have the Iran forces and their proxies and a group of countries looking to create a more stable and prosperous Middle East. And I think that is going to be the dynamics and the conflict that we will see unfold. And hopefully, the United States has been doing everything they can to pressure Iran not to escalate, and Iran knows that it would come at a huge personal and political cost if they were to continue to escalate. Israel and Iran at the moment are acting in a way that I would categorize it as careful as you can be, because Israel certainly knows the consequences of a much bigger all-out conflict. And I think Hezbollah would be the trigger there, that if Hezbollah were to activate their serious forces and artillery and infantry, then it would be a very, very, very dangerous situation. And all Israel wants is to not have conflict. So I think it's dangerous, but Iran has been funding all of the worst players in the Middle East, and I think the world has now seen that, and it'll be up to the forces of stability and prosperity to try and be a counter to that and work together to ensure that there can be a prosperous and safe Middle East for future generations.
I do wonder what kind of impact it's going to have on Iranian domestic politics as well, because their economy is in the toilet at the moment. I think their inflation rate's around about 32%. And obviously in 2022, we saw a revolt by Iranian citizens on the streets against the theocratic regime that runs that runs Iran, and read a report over the weekend in the New York Times that their sort of moral police are back out on the streets of their major cities and imposing this new sort of crackdown on particularly on women who are refusing to wear a hijab.
Yeah.
And security forces are being filmed, harassing and attacking women who have been caught walking down just like a regular high street, not wearing the hijab. And so I'm just wondering, what imbalance does that create in Iranian domestic politics as well? There's so many levels of this to play out right across the whole region, actually, which you could do a whole another podcast on. But I appreciate your reflections on that. Okay, we are at our time, I think, but I think you need to go, don't you?
Let's sneak in one little thing on the NBA in a few minutes, and then we'll go.
Okay.
Because we promised our 3 NBA fans that we would do this. So let's.
Okay. How long do we have, Josh Burns, for this, so I can just keep you on time?
Let's do it in 3 to 5 minutes.
All right, 5 minutes. I want to get let's do the West and then the East. So we're in the playoffs right now. Round 1 started this weekend. I want to get your sense of who's going to progress through the West, Western Conference, through to at least to the conference finals. What have you got? Who do you like?
Okay, let me bring this up. So in the East, the Celtics will defeat the Heat. That will happen comfortably in 4 or 5 games. I think, and it pains me to say this, but I think the Cavaliers will come out on top against the Magic. I think Donovan Mitchell has a good support cast. They're solid. They won't get past the Celtics, but they will get through the Magic. And I do love watching the Magic play. I think they're exciting. And I think Orlando will push Cavs, but they'll ultimately get through this. And Joe Ingles, old Joe, I bought a Joe Ingles singlet recently, and I love it. Best Magic to play since Penny Hardaway. Anyway, then pushing on with the East. Look, Giannis being out is a big out, and I don't think the Bucks can go much further than the first round without him. And if he doesn't come back, then the Pacers could get through Milwaukee, and just by sheer injury, I think he'll come back early as a result. But if Giannis is in and fit, Milwaukee comfortably. If not, Indiana could get through this, and the Knicks, I think, get through the 76ers in 6. The 76ers will come back. Embiid's knee's a bit sore, so it'll depend on that.
Okay,
ultimately,
there are two there I don't agree with you on that one. I do think I think Indiana's going to beat the Bucks, and
here first, folks.
I don't think Giannis is coming back at all, and I actually think Philly is going to beat New York.
You're insane. Joel Embiid's knee is crumbly, and I just think the hype in Madison Square Garden will get them through 4 games.
Jalen Brunson's their only player on that team. You take him out, and then where are they going to score? I just don't think they've got any height.
I think, without Julius Randle, that is a big out for them. Well, either way, the Celtics are coming out of the East. I mean, there's no one else who can compete with the Celtics, I don't think, unless the Bucks were at full strength with Giannis. But that may not happen.
So who do you think is the Tories final? So if you've got the Celtics going through to the final, who do you think is going to make it from the bottom of the bracket? That Milwaukee, Indiana, New York, Philly.
Giannis comes back, then it's the Bucks. If he doesn't, then I don't know, throw a blanket over them.
Probably New York, right?
Yeah, New York.
If you have New York, okay, very good. The West.
The West. Now we have. I'm getting the wrap up for my staff, but we're in the West, so we're going to do this quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So the Thunder will defeat the Pelicans.
Yes.
And I'm so into the Thunder at the moment. They are a great team to watch with Shea and our boy Josh Giddey and obviously Jason Williams. And Chet Holmgren. They're great. They will get through the Pelicans. The Clippers will defeat the Mavericks, but the Mavericks and Luka and Kyrie will win a couple of games, and that will push them. But with James Harden and Paul George and potentially Kawhi coming back, the Clippers will get through that.
Mm-hmm.
The Timberwolves will defeat the Suns. The Timberwolves are a threat in the West, and people underestimate them at their own peril. They've got a dynamic team. Karl Anthony Towns and Rudy Gobert are two big defenders. Karl can score, but Anthony Edwards is the real deal. This league is going to be his in a couple of years. He is a scary, scary prospect. Although the Suns have such great offensive power with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant that you just can't count them out. But I think Timberwolves will get through that. The Nuggets will defeat the Lakers. It'll make me sad, though. I think LeBron will give this series a shake. He's playing out of his skin, but the Nuggets will get through. They're just too good, and they've got too many options with Murray and Gordon and obviously the big Jokic. So I think what happens is the Thunder will get through. They beat the Pels. It'll be a great series between the Thunder and the Clippers, but ultimately the Thunder will get through that. And then the Timberwolves and the Nuggets will play off. The Nuggets will beat the Timberwolves, and it will be Thunder versus the Nuggets. I think Denver, at their best, get through that, and then it's Denver versus Boston again.
So I'm worried about the Nuggets. Obviously, that's the team I'm worried about, and I don't know how we go against them in the 7-game series. But I think that we match up well against either Minnesota or OKC. And so I'm hoping one of those two teams knocks out the Nuggets either in the second round or in the finals. That's my hope. And then once it happens, I think we're good. Go Celtics.
Go Team Australia. Go Joe Ingles. That's what I say.
It annoys me so much that you just go for players. It's such a millennial.
No, I go for Orlando. I went for Orlando when Shaq and Penny were there, but I don't live in Orlando. So, but now Joe's there. Old Joe's the guy.
I need to let you go and do the rest of your job as opposed to talking basketball. Josh Burns, thank you so much for your time again today. I really appreciate it. Keep up the great work, and I'm sure we'll talk to you sooner rather than later.
See you, mate.
Bye. Thanks for listening to Socially Democratic. Did you like the podcast? Hit the follow or subscribe button and be sure to leave a review on Apple Podcast or Podchaser. And to get all the latest on Socially Democratic, follow Dunn Street on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. And we'll see you next Friday.